All sheep go to heaven and all goats go to hell, and it appears neither knows why. This is Pastor Travis with a City of Seekers. Welcome. Judgment. There's a topic people love to avoid. Can't we talk about anything else? I don't know, love, kindness, leprosy, please, anything. And the answer is no. We must talk about judgment because it's Jesus who brought us our parable for today. And quite honestly, Jesus brings up judgment quite a bit. The topic of judgment is inherently fear-provoking, but today's passage from Matthew 25 should absolutely terrify us. And here's why. The sheep were saved and didn't understand why. The goats were not saved, and they didn't understand why. They were judged by a measurement they didn't understand in the slightest. Listen to this. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be assembled before him. He will separate people one from another, like a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. Now, in Jesus' day, the shepherds often grazed the sheep and the goats together. But then at the end of the day, they would separate the sheep and the goats into different pens. What Jesus is making clear here is that at the end of our day or at the end of our lives, we too will be separated. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. The king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Here's where things get shocking. The sheep apparently don't know when they did these things. They have to ask Jesus. Then the righteous, or the sheep, will answer him, "Lord, when? When? When did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When? Did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or naked and clothe you? When? Did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" They don't know when. They got things right. Moving on to verse 40, the king will answer them, "I tell you the truth, just as you did it for one of the least of these, brothers or sisters of mine, you did it for me." Now we're going to come back to that important line, but before we do that, get this. The goats also did all of these things. They did all of these things, except somehow in the doing, they got it wrong. Then he will say to those on his left, "Depart from me, you accursed, into the eternal fire that has been prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not receive me as a guest, naked, and you did not clothe me, sick and in prison, and you did not visit me." Then, verse 44, they too, in other words, they also, just like the sheep who didn't understand, will answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not give you whatever you needed?" So, in other words, they gave. When did we not give? He will answer them, "I tell you the truth, just as you did not do it for one of the least of these, you did not do it for me. And these will depart into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life." So the sheep gave and the goats gave. If both gave, the difference in judgment between the two was not about the giving. It was about the recipients. Listen to how specific Jesus gets when he addresses the goats in this parable. He said, I tell you the truth, just as you did it for one of the least of these brothers or sisters of mine, you did it for me. Now, he could have said, just as you have done it for others, or just as you have done it for those who you consider to be the least. He doesn't. He says, just as you have done it for the least of these brothers or sisters of mine. To be absolutely sure about what Jesus was saying here, I looked up the Greek words that he used to verify what he meant. It is absolutely clear that Jesus is explicitly identifying a familial relationship to him. Those who are as close to him as family. We can add even more clarity to Jesus' words if we go back and study Mark chapter 3. In that chapter, the religious leaders pull a political stunt with Jesus' biological family. The religious leaders trick them into believing that Jesus is crazy. His biological family then comes to Jesus' house to physically restrain him. The place is full of Jesus' followers, so much so that his biological family can't get in and get a hold of him. One of his disciples notifies him that his family is looking for him. Jesus asks all those who are surrounding him, who are my brothers and my mother? In other words, who is familial to me? He answers his own question. And he says, those who do the will of my Father, those are my brothers and my sisters. It's his disciples. That's who he's indicating in Matthew chapter 25 and in this parable. His disciples are the least of these brothers and sisters of his. It's the people who are preaching, who are spreading the word, who are struggling and who are fighting, who are sacrificing and proclaiming, the ones actually doing the work. We can add even more clarity and more understanding to Jesus' words here. All of the items listed in this passage were direct consequences of preaching the gospel in those days. Two items are really easy to identify: being in prison and getting visited, as well as being a stranger and being invited in. I mean, really, do you really think that through this parable, God is asking us to invite anyone and everyone into our homes? That's nuts. That's absolutely crazy. Nobody does that because they're not idiots. If some guy emerges from the woods chewing on his own arm and talking to his imaginary friends, I'm not going to invite him into my house, allow him to sleep next to my children so that he can put his knives and syringes on the end table. No, not going to do it. However, his disciples relied on people taking them in as strangers as they proclaimed the good news. I think beyond that, we can add even more clarity to Jesus' words here. Now, this is speculative. This is just me. So take it or leave it, but I love it, so I'm going to proclaim it. This passage is incredibly redundant. However, in the parable, when Jesus addresses the goats, he leaves out the familial relationship of the least of these. I would like to suggest that he indicated his disciples in another way at that moment. Imagine Jesus telling this parable this way: I tell you the truth, just as you did not do it for one of the least of these, you did not do it for me. You see, I think he just motioned to his disciples who were right there with him. Finally, this passage is written near the end of Matthew, right before Jesus was taken. You see, it appears to me that Jesus was trying to place, if you will, the best insurance plan he could to provide for his disciples, to provide for these friends who he loved, who were going to be doing his work in the absence of his physical presence. He was trying by this parable to provide for them and their continued ministry. In summary, I believe that Jesus is saying, just as you have supported even the least of these, my family, my disciples, as they are doing my ministry, you also have done it for me. Isn't this how you would feel if someone gave to a person you knew and loved deeply who was in need because they were sacrificially doing some of the most important work the world has ever known? See, I believe the answer to that is yes. This passage, and therefore this judgment, is not about who gave. It's about the recipients. Now, who are these people today? It might be harder to identify them now than then. It's not as if Jesus is motioning to his disciples today or pointing them out. However, I would like to suggest that today, the people needing your support would share the same characteristics embodied in the disciples then. They would be proclaiming despite risk, physical risk, social risk, financial risk. Sacrifices either have been or could be made. They would embody the same spirit and engage in the same kind of actions as the disciples, and in some way could use your support because of it. When we believe that we have truly identified someone like this, may we be the kind of people who support them, and in doing so, support Jesus himself. Please like, share, and subscribe. This is Pastor Travis with the City of Seekers. Thank you for joining me.